All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Bidding Wars Multiple Offer Tips class. Carrie is gonna be gracious enough to start us off, and we want questions, input, so don't hesitate to interrupt it at any point.
Definitely ask your questions, and this is not a one size fits all type situation. So these are just ideas that I've seen work, both as a listing agent and a buyer's agent in this market. So just getting your mind thinking about, creative ways to get your clients under contract, because it's tricky, right? So how can you stand out? And it's not always, the highest offer. And I think that's, thinking about more than just that purchase price. I always say the number is important, but there's other contingencies in our offers, right, that we want to keep in mind. So say your client finds a property that they are in love with, they want to make an offer. The first thing I usually do is give that listing agent a call. If this information, I first check MLS and see if these questions are answered already for me, so that we're not bothering them, because usually there's lots of calls and emails if you have a hot listing. So making sure that we're being mindful of that. So asking them, when do they want to move out of the property? So is there a certain closing date that they're looking for? And then I always ask if we're thinking about using an escalation clause, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth later, but will they present an escalation clause? Is that something that the agent is comfortable with, and they feel comfortable presenting and explaining to their client? We certainly don't want to not be considered because we use that and they're not feeling so confident with it. So I always check to make sure that that would be a welcome addition to an offer. And then is there anything else that we should know that's important to them? Like, do they want to, maybe there's a chandelier they want to take, and I don't know, anything else that we should know to just make a really clean offer right out of the gate. And then also I will ask if they will present a personal letter, video, whatever it is, from my clients. So I know some people are not presenting those anymore, so I'm not going to have my client go through the trouble of writing up the letter if it's just going to be not presented. So I'll ask about that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I also disclaim. I apologize. There were people waiting in the waiting room, and the message wasn't popping up. So for those of you that got in late, we had just started like 20 seconds before that. So I am so sorry. But anyway, I just had a question. What are we seeing as far as because I haven't been carrying any listings really over the winter. But like I felt like in the fall, like listing agents especially were getting like getting tired of escalation clauses, and I was starting to hear that like a lot of agents were saying, we won't be looking at any or whatever. I mean, are they still widely accepted? Is it, are agents hoping that those aren't used? I mean, I know they can't stop us from using them, but I just was curious if we were seeing a move towards
instances, and certain agents in particular that I noticed consistently have a note saying that they will not present, hey Kim, will not present an escalation. But I think for the most part, people are okay with it. I haven't found too many people who were like,
right. And I think we have to be careful of that. Like an agent should never be saying, I'm not going to present this or that, or I'm not going to present a letter from your buyer. Like that's up to the seller. If the seller has given you instructions, if you've counseled your seller and say, hey, I think it's best that we don't do escalation clauses, then sure, that instruction can come from the seller. But of course, legally, we have to present everything. So I think, we have to be real careful, about that. And just because the listing agent says something, if your buyer wants to do something, then you kind of have to do it. And I think as listing agents, we have to present whatever comes in just to cover our butts. But
I think if the sellers become overwhelmed with the number of offers or the escalations and all the different contingencies, we just go back and say highest and best, just contact everyone, highest and best, and push.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad, I mean, of course, it's always highest and best in those multiple offer situations, but I have seen some of those, like just doing a reset, like just saying, once you've established what the market is, say you listed it for 300, but you get 8 offers over 350 or something, per your seller's instructions, you could go back to everyone and say, my seller has instructed me to tell everyone we're only looking at, cash offers over 350, or, offers over 350 with no inspections, or with a flexible closing date, or, whatever. So that's certainly a good strategy, on the listing side, and something to be prepared for on the buyer side. So.
Well, I know I'm the northern agent, but I use the escalation clause on almost every offer I'm in multiple offer with. And I also use the affirmation of offer form most of the time. And I do get a lot of blowback and questions about that, but I just feel like using that gives my buyer a lot better feel if we don't win.
Yeah, Carrie, why don't you, not every agent might be aware that's out there.
Yeah, well, Tanya, you're the expert on that.
Or Tanya.
Explain what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, what is that?
The affirmation of offer, if you're the buyer agent, you sign it and you submit that with your offer, and the listing agent just signs saying, acknowledging that they have presented the offer.
Yeah, it's in zip forms.
That way, your offer was actually presented and the seller saw it, and you can give that to your buyer if you lose, and then you'll have less bad feelings. They can also sign a counter offer on that affirmation of offer form. But I find that a lot of agents don't understand it, or they get offended. And I just explained, this just protects you and I, so the buyers understand that their offer was presented. Now, you guys in Portland, I'm competing with, maybe 10 offers at a time. If you're competing with 40 offers, then that other form probably wouldn't be appropriate and would just irritate the listing agent.
Yeah, they shouldn't get irritated. That's silly, but I hear you.
Yeah. Well, that's on here. On our list here of things, like building rapport with that other agent and not being annoying, for lack of a word, I guess. Because if you do have a busy listing and it's, you're setting up showings, dealing with all of that, and then there's obviously going to be questions, which is totally understandable. But if you're reaching out just to reach out, sometimes I'll have an agent text me, call me, email me, 10 different times with how many offers you have, and it's like, okay, like, why don't you go ahead and put in, I've told you it's multiple offers. Are you going to make a different offer, whether it's 8 offers or 25 offers? Please submit your best offer. And that you have to work with this person through the whole transaction. So the way that you present yourself from the beginning, if it's someone that's not familiar with you, is important. In my opinion, it's like, if they seem like scattered and hectic, they can't give you a full offer package, with everything in there and, the correct property. I've seen lots of different offers that obviously people are just reusing in zip forms, the same, contract package over and over, which is totally fine. Why wouldn't you? But take the time to go through and update, the date that you're submitting the offer, the names of the other agent, make sure they're spelled properly. The sellers, the sellers can just be annoyed if you spell their name wrong or whatever. So just don't give them anything to be agitated over, right? Fill it out nice and clean. And with, the correct property information updated on there. I can't tell you how many times, like I said, I have seen just messy, and it looks like you're not really paying attention. They're not serious about it. And that, the sellers don't know that this is their 12th offer that they've made, right? So they like, oh, well, that's just a deed from the last property. You and I might understand that, but sellers that do this maybe once or twice in their life, they don't understand, So think about like putting yourself in that person's shoes and how would you want someone to behave if you were the listing agent or you were the seller, and try to think from that perspective and not just, obviously we're trying to do what's right for our client, but I think putting yourself in that space can help you get to that place of picking up on their cues and what they want. And again, it's not a one size fits all situation here. And you might treat one offer totally different than you treat the next offer, just based on, the situation that you're dealing with. I saw Kimmy wrote in the chat, missing information. And it just, it leads you to think like, are they taking this seriously? And, are they just throwing in offers to see if one sticks, right?
As buyer agents for Maine real estate experts, like, I mean, I can't believe this is still a thing. I mean, I knew it used to be a thing, but like in this day and age, you can't be submitting offers without without a pre-qual letter. I mean, that's just, crazy, I think, and sloppy. And, it's literally like the first thing. Well, okay, it's not the first thing I look for. I'm looking at the price on the offer and stuff first, but like, if there's not a pre-approval letter attached, like I'm going right back to that agent, and my confidence just went way down in dealing with that agent, as far as having their act together and being someone that I would want to work with or have my seller work with. So
definitely. And the other thing, while you're in this preparation stage with your offer, is to reach out to the lender and have them run the property through to see if it qualifies for an appraisal waiver. This would be a really strong attribute to your offer. Most lenders understand how busy agents are and how hard we're working to get people under contract, and they will. It takes some time. Honestly, it's not easy. It's not like they just put the address in and it comes right up. They have to like fully submit the file as if the offer had been accepted. So it does take them a little bit of time to do this, but certainly worthwhile, and could be the difference between you getting your offer accepted and not, because at that point you're almost as good as cash, right? There's still financing contingency, but there's no appraisal happening. So that's one less worry for the seller. Where do you put an appraisal waiver? Do you mean in the offer? Is that what you're asking? You could write it right in section 26, or you could have the lender add it to their pre-approval letter that this property has qualified at this price for an appraisal waiver. Yeah, either one of those would be fine. So checking on that to make sure. And then also, if your client has the ability, like obviously it's very difficult to get people under contract with government loans. So working closely with your lender to try to figure out what's the strongest type of financing that they can qualify for. And then another step that I always take is having my lenders call out to that listing agent and reiterate the strength of the buyer, and that this is not just a pre-qualification, that they've run them all the way through as far as they can at that point, and that they are in great shape. They just need to assign a property to the buyer's file, and this gives the listing agent more confidence that they're working with a reputable lender that takes the time to do that. I've had more people accept when this happens and mention it as part of the reason that they accepted, because they felt confident that the lender was already involved. They don't just get a standard boilerplate approval letter. It's just one more thing that we can do for our buyers to help them stand out. So I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do, and ask your lenders to help you. They should be partners with you in this process. So when you're putting your package together, you're getting all of the documents together. So the synopsis, the purchase and sale, if there's an escalation, any addendums, proof of funds or financing letter, disclosure, deed, everything packaged together that they would need for their file. So and submitting it all together in one email. I think it's really important, because if they're getting 40 offers and they have to search through, oh, you sent the disclosure here and the purchase and sale here and the lender's letter here. Again, just trying to make their life easier and giving them one clean, neat package, I think is a great way to start and stand out.
I'm curious, what are some different programs that people use? I use PDF Binder. I think it was free. Don't quote me on that, but it certainly didn't cost much. But it lets me, add all my PDFs, and then I can sort the order that I want them to bind together in. I don't know if there's some other program out there.
Yeah, I just use DocuSign, and you can download like the complete file once it's signed as one package. So
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also
Well,
use
when you
Zip
initially send it to the buyer.
I just create a blank file in zip forms, put it all, upload them all in and download them as one document too. So there's a bunch of different ways that you
Yeah.
can.
But I think the order is really important. Like, put them in the order that, like when you get an offer, what are you first looking for? Like a lot of time, like I said, me personally, I'll put the pre-approval letter, first, just because it's one page. And, so it's easy to blow past that. And now the agent knows, okay, we've got the pre-qual letter or whatever. And a lot of times I'll put the check second, and then I'll put the offer, or maybe if the buyer's written the letter, I'll, put that first. But, I might put some single page stuff that's important, first, that they're going to be able to get through real quick. And then they get to the offer, obviously, put all that other stuff, at the end. They don't, they'll think you were really thorough for having the deed initialed and the MLS sheet and the disclosure and the lead paint and all that, and everything properly filled in. Again, it makes you look really thorough when you forget to have your buyer, check off or initial the acknowledgement on the lead paint, or you've left their name off the top of something, or you didn't have them sign or initial something, it makes you look sloppy, I think. And I know it's nitpicky, but again, the listing agent's looking for, they have 10 offers, they're looking for a good partner. So anything could be used against you and your buyer.
So I use, I'm an Apple user. I use PDF Expert, and I think it's a pro version. I think I paid like $79 or maybe $100 for it. It's a one-time fee, but I like it because I can, it's just faster to reorder. I know there's some free programs out there, but I have no patience. So if you're doing any kind of volume, I want to be able to just do things really quickly. So I like PDF Expert. You can also mark up, you can also like mark up documents, it's got a bunch of other features I might use for a listing, like to draw arrows, and again, breaking stuff apart really quickly for SkySlope or whatever. I'm all about
Makes it easier too.
Yeah.
SkySlope will allow you also to send it in a bundle.
Mhm.
So if you're, it'll send it as a PDF. So if you are using SkySlope for all of your files, you can do that as well and just forward it to the agent.
So obviously lots of options. Don't be that agent that's sending 6 attachments, in the email. A lot of us are working on our phones. We're reviewing these, offers on the road, in our car, from our phone. And it makes everybody's life, more difficult. And then we have to send it, to the seller, and, much easier to send them one package than, an email with 6 attachments, and they have to figure out which one is the one they really want to look at. So.
Yeah, and that way, things might get overlooked too, if they're just looking for that purchase and sale, and they're not going to take the time to look if you did write a letter at the financing or whatever. So if it's all together, that they're going to see everything that's included. So.
Yeah, on that letter, I wanted to comment, like, obviously every agent has to do what they, feel is right for them and their clients. I know there's a lot of talk out there about, no, we shouldn't be writing letters anymore, or no, we shouldn't be letting our sellers see them. Maybe I'm, slow to come around or whatever, but I personally think they're still important. I certainly don't think a buyer or a buyer's agent, is going to get in trouble for writing one. Certainly if, you're putting information in there that, could be used to discriminate, for a protected housing class, and then the seller and the listing agent are using that information to pick you, okay, now you're going to have a problem. But, personally, I don't think, as long as you keep it professional, that there's a problem, again, in submitting it. And as a listing agent, I personally don't think, there's a problem, letting your seller review those. Certainly if you get one and that you think for some, crazy reason could be an issue, then probably you're going to advise your seller, that this offer did include a letter for, fair housing reasons. I don't believe that I should, transmit this, to you, and you probably want to talk to me, or your office owner about a situation like that. There have been situations that were borderline, or, things that we might have to report, for a fair housing violation, because we certainly, would rather self-report something than, have something come up, later. But as far as not using those, personally, I'm not a fan of that. And again, you may want to write a letter or a cover email or something with your buyer's offer too, just to let the agent know not only why they should pick your buyer, but why they should pick, your buyer's offer, because of what you're going to do to make sure the transaction, closes.
That's good. I do see, some people are definitely still presenting them, but some people are just very much scared to or opposed to it. And I know, Vicky, you said that you saw someone say they don't allow them to be presented. I think, I can't remember what company that is, but I know I'm familiar with what you're talking about. They don't want to see them. And that's why I always ask that question up front. So nobody's writing a letter if it's not going to be presented. But if you are writing letters, just be careful what you're talking about. Stick to things they liked about the house, and they have beautiful gardens, and your client loves to garden, or whatever, things like that are not hot button issues that could get you in trouble if you are going to write the letters.
What if your buyer delivers the letter to the house themselves with a fruit basket? Like, is that
Can't stop them.
can't stop them, right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Bill, you're a genius.
Evil genius, maybe.
Well, the arrangement people love you. Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's so much creativity going on in the market that certainly you got to think outside the box. So that's a really good example. Do you want to talk about contingencies, Bill?
Sure. So of course, we all know about investigations. Again, some of you, because you just had a hot listing, or maybe, you had a buyer that was, one of 10 offers on a listing, will know better as far as what's, more common nowadays. Like I said, I've always been a big fan of carefully advising your buyer that not doing investigations is an option. I mean, especially in a situation where, you're doing 10, 20, 30, $40,000 over asking. Are we really, concerned about, again, it's very property specific. Is it a newer property? Is it on public water, public sewer? Is the roof newer? Is the boiler newer? Like, what are the big things with the property, and what are the chances that, something's gonna, need a costly repair? But I mean, I feel like I'm hearing and seeing more of either investigations not being used at all, and or especially, language that, is very specific as far as, the buyer's only going to, consider repairs, over $2,000 or over $5,000, something major. And I think certainly, if your buyer's not comfortable, not doing repairs, and again, we can never advise not to do repairs, but I think we have to give our buyers all the options, because if they find out later that they lost, and the reason they lost is because they had inspections and the winning buyer didn't. And some agents will tell you this, and quite frankly, I think that that's fine. And it's a way to build rapport with agents, back on the, there's so many ways to build rapport with agents, and a lot of it happens prior to the transaction, that you're currently in. I've heard of situations where, one agent's buyer got, they won the bidding process because the listing agent essentially liked them or respected how they treated them in a similar situation when they were on the other side, and maybe they lost. But you're the buyer agent now, but you were the listing agent before, and just how you handled the process, was able, you impressed that agent with, sometimes agents just like to know, why their buyer lost, and you can do that without, revealing confidential information about the winning offer. But maybe it was cash, maybe it was financing, maybe it was, over a certain price. I mean, you can give some generalities just to, let other agents know where they stand. So I think that's all important. So, again, I think a lot of you are already using it. Buyer agrees to not ask for any repairs or a price reduction for, items over a certain value. I think those are, that's something that you can use. Another contingency we've talked about a little recently is the appraisal gap clause. I know we sent out some language about that. Something, and thank you, Tanya, for for reminding me. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, and it doesn't get mentioned a lot, but there is a clause library in zip forms, and there is an appraisal gap language in there already. So you have to be in an addendum or in section 26 or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, Tanya can correct me, but you need to be in the document, and then the clause library will be up in the menu, and you can pull that down and insert a clause. But that appraisal gap language is in there for you if you don't want to think of if you don't want to think about the wording of that or how to write that. So again, in the past, a lot of agents and a lot of companies aren't big fans of the seller occupying after closing, or renting the property back, or that sort of thing. But again, in this market, where your buyer can lose out a lot, again, you have to properly counsel them, but there may be some of these risks that they want to take. And again, I think we still have to present those options, with the proper caveats, to the buyer. So again, allowing the seller to rent back, maybe you let the seller, stay for 30 days for free. Maybe the buyer's got a secure rental, or they're staying with friends or family, or their situation's flexible. And so, you can give the seller that flexibility, and that may be the reason why your buyer wins above and beyond, price. So that's something that you can look out for. One of the options that I was listening to, and we're going to send all this stuff out to you after, like all the stuff that we're covering. So don't worry about writing it down, but you'll see some of the stuff was taken from, I was listening to this great podcast one day on a walk, and I'll give it full credit to that on the stuff we'll send to you later. But giving the seller a move out weekend, where you close on Friday, but they get the whole weekend to move out. That can be a huge stress relief for the seller. Maybe you put in a flexible seller closing clause, and that can sound something like, buyer is willing to close within 30 to 90 days at the seller's discretion, with at least 2 weeks notice, or something like that. Just to give the seller that flexibility as far as what they need. If you've ever moved before, a lot of us know the worst thing about moving is having to go back to that house that you just moved out of to clean it. So, maybe you're offering, or your buyer's offering to have the house cleaned for the seller, or you're putting some clause in the contract, like, buyer will accept home as is, after seller move out, and will take full responsibility for cleaning, or again, maybe you're sending a cleaner in there. This podcast that I was listening to, the agent was actually worked with a local vendor, a cleaner, and they got gift certificates, and they were sending those with the offer, for the seller to use for, free cleaning services, obviously up to a certain amount, whatever, maybe it was $500. And again, this might, your buyer might not be the highest price, but some of these little extras that you can put in there, or some of these things that the buyer's willing to be flexible on, you may find that the seller wants to work with you, or the listing agent encourages the seller to work with you because, you're being courteous, you're being flexible, you're being, you're willing to work with the seller, and, do some things for them that are creative, that cause them to want to work, work with you. So has anyone seen anything really creative, or, has your buyer, done something creative, or, have you gotten any multiple offers with creative stuff, Connie?
I had, well, mine was the listing, but one of the buyers that came along, she was RD, or I think FHA, and they put right in the offer that they would do any repairs that were required in order to pass inspection for FHA, for the lender. And they did end up having to do a few things, and they, I sort of oversaw, just kind of kept an eye on them, and they did a few things, and it was reappraised, and it went smoothly. So I felt good about that, because it was, like I said, I can't remember FHA or RD, because nobody's able to get those anymore. So it was,
Yeah, no,
it
I
was
think
nice.
that's important, because those are scary. I mean, I don't know that listing agents should be so scared of those programs, but certainly if you got conventional or cash offers, it's hard to compete. But reassuring a seller that, hey, we're willing to take care of any nitpicky stuff that comes up. We're willing to do some work to get your property, like, rest assured, we're going to take care of it. I think that could be really important. And anyone else with some creative stuff that they have seen that they want to share?
Got a free rent back for my sellers and a couple offers. It was multiple offers that did that. So I thought that was really unique. I mean, minus the security deposit, because I think the law in Maine is you have to have a security deposit with any lease, and part of that is having a lease in place. But that was pretty unique to me, and pretty shocking, and very, very intriguing for the sellers.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So, here's some other ideas that, and again, some of these things may sound crazy, but again, offering 30, 40, 50,000 more than asking price, to me is pretty crazy. So, in context, I don't think some of these ideas, are that crazy. And of course, you're doing them in lieu of, maybe going way over, maybe you're still going 30,000 instead of 40,000 over, but you're throwing in, some of these options, just to see, which, you're throwing a bunch of stuff up against the wall and seeing what sticks. Different things are going to appeal to different sellers, but probably, they're all going to think, wow, this buyer is really going all out to try to win this property. But some of the ideas that I got from this podcast were, offering to pay some or all of the seller's closing costs, perhaps minus commission. That's sort of technically a seller closing cost, but maybe you're paying their deed prep, maybe the buyer's paying their transfer tax. So maybe you're looking at, $3,000 or $4,000. And ultimately that's factored in, to the net price that the seller is getting. But just the fact that your buyer is being creative and offering some of these options might be something that, impresses the seller or impresses their agent. some buyers have gone as far as to offer to pay for the seller's inspection, appraisal, or closing costs on the house that they're looking to buy. Maybe the seller needs to buy to sell, and obviously the buyer that's willing and able to be the most flexible, in that situation. Carrie, do you want to cover some of those other ideas that
Sure.
buyers can put out there?
Yeah, so I think just looping back to the escalation clause, and how you're crafting that. Because a lot of times there's not a comp that supports, maybe how high you have to go in this market. So usually the conversation I have with my buyers is, if you see this close for, X amount, like what's that number to you, that if you see it close for that, you're going to be like, shoot, I would have paid that. Right. So that's like that top number you're going to use in that escalation. And then using like a pretty aggressive increment, $500 is probably not going to be enough if, some other terms are more favorable on the other offer you're competing against. So think like 2,000 to 5,000 increments on there. But, I think in this market, like we can't depend on data like we could in, past years. So you're more offering with your heart, I don't know, instead of your head. And that's where like asking them that question and having them think about like, okay, like how much, would I want to pay for this house? And, putting that as like all right, if I see it, you're offering 350 max, and if you see it close for 351, you're going to be fine with that. Okay. So, and then I use like odd numbers too, that, so you might be able to beat somebody out by a little bit. So maybe you're escalating by $3,500 increments, or like your max is 351, right? Instead of 350, because a lot of other people might cap at an even number. So just going over by just a little bit of what you think other people might be using for that escalated number. So all of these little tricks
They're
are
like the Price is Right strategy, like
it's
guess the price of the prize package.
Yeah, it's just because I think a lot of, people are like, oh, it's listed for, 300, I'm gonna offer 350, right? So I'm not saying that that's the
Yeah.
their number, but just say like a lot of people just round up to like an even or 50,000 more. So, well, if you're $51,000 more, then maybe that secures the property for your client. So just thinking like a little bit more outside the box about those numbers, because you're likely not going to be able to rely on, 5 comps that say it's worth 350, right? So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind with the escalation. Do you guys have any other questions about escalation clauses? No. Okay. And then again, going back to like, we talked about this a little bit earlier, working with a good lender, and somebody local, is always better in my opinion. Sometimes people will come to you with, an out-of-state lender or like a bigger bank that, is more like a call center type situation. And again, if you have somebody local who maybe they're familiar with, or at least you can say, oh, they're right in, Portland or whatever, and hopefully that lender is calling out, use them and lean on these lender partners. They should be willing to help you. And if you're working with somebody who is resistant to that or not on board with it, I think, look at other options. And Bill and Josh, Yvonne, and I can always help to connect you with some good lender partners, because that can make all the difference in a competitive market. Just having familiarity with the lender and confidence that it is going to make it to closing, right? So you can be offering, everything to this seller, but if they don't feel confident in that lender, then they might go with somebody who is offering a little bit less, but they feel very confident with the financing situation. That's, questions that, Kim and I have talked about recently on offers that she's gotten. It's like, do you know this person? And, you know, it's all the details, like the purchase price is important, but if you can never get that to closing, it really does not matter, right? So that's where you're going to craft the strongest offer that you can to give that seller confidence that we can get this to closing and get them close to that number, if not that number that we're under contract for, right? So anything that you can do to shore that up and build that confidence with the listing agent, and hopefully they're passing that on to the seller, that's just going to help your client secure that house, right? So part of that is, do not settle for a pre-qualification letter. Like, that is not acceptable in this market. I wouldn't, if I was on the listing end of it and you sent me a pre-qual letter, I would say likely they haven't looked at any financial documents. They might not even have pulled their credit. And usually that's just like a initial sort of like, oh, I make, $50,000 a year and I've got a 700 credit score. I swear I do. You know what I mean? Like, very casual, usually preliminary type conversations. And we want buyers who are pre-approved, that they've gone through all those steps. They've provided bank statements, W-2s, tax returns to the lender. So again, working closely with the lender and getting your buyer to put in that extra work and counseling your buyer on why we're doing this work. And, sometimes it takes a few failed offers with a client to get them in that mindset of, okay, how do we make some changes to adjust to be more competitive? So you can say, well, remember when I told you to use my local lender and to, get your pre-approval? Sometimes it's a multi-step process with buyers, you can see on your faces, you all know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, I think that just stay, you're the expert, stay in that role and guiding them through it, because obviously you want them to be successful in getting a home, and just letting your buyers dictate what they're going to do is really not going to work. Like, you have to take control and be the expert and help guide them. So what else do we have here, Bill? Larger earnest money deposits. Definitely beef those up to wherever they are comfortable and they can go. I think like the days of $1,000, $2,000 is kind of, I don't see that very much at all anymore. We talked about the type of financing, so getting that, the strongest program that they can qualify for, go with that. Also, like, I see some of my clients who might have the ability to pay cash for a property, but they would rather finance. So adding something about that in section 26 to give a little bit more weight to the offer of like, hey, if something happens with my financing, which I don't think it will, but I do have the ability to pay cash, and maybe you are showing proof of funds for that. Similarly with if you're offering to pay an appraisal gap, sending over proof of funds showing I actually really do have this money available. That can add to the strength of the offer. So physically showing, a bank statement or whatever they're comfortable with, a letter from their bank saying they have X amount available to cover. So thinking about that. The other thing I see buyers doing is saying like, okay, I'm doing a 20% down conventional offer, but I'm willing to switch that to, 10% down if I have to cover an appraisal gap. And, getting confirmation from the lender that that would still work. It's really just being flexible and thinking like, how can we strengthen this up so that the seller knows we're thinking ahead, and if there is a roadblock, this is how we're going to deal with it right up front, instead of waiting, 3 or 4 weeks into the contract and then having to deal with those solutions. Like, you already have them ironed out right up front. And I think that goes a long way with sellers in this market. Yeah. I think that's basically what we had here, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or things that you want to share that are working for you?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, we were just talking about lenders, like out-of-state lenders or internet lenders or whatever. I had some folks that they had an out-of-state bank. I spoke with the lender, had the letter pre-approval, felt okay about it. But in the end, the lender wanted to use their title company. And it was an out-of-state title company, and they ended up sending this bonehead notary to do the closing, and I was just blown away by it. So ever since then, I've insisted on, if it was some sort of funky bank, I've insisted on a local title company so that we have a real, somebody we know locally doing the closing and getting it to close.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was proof of funds. Another one fall apart at the last minute. The EMD or the down payment, the down payment that the buyers had come up with was 20%, and it was a high priced thing. They needed to come up with like $50,000. And they did not put anything in the offer about contingent upon getting a home equity line or anything like that. Last minute, it fell apart because they couldn't get the equity line, which is where they were going to get their $50,000 to put down on the property. So I learned a lesson there. If it is sort of a, like if they say, oh, we're putting, 25-40% down, and we've got all this cash to get proof of funds even for the down payment.
Yeah, and that's where Carrie talked about, in the old days, a pre-qual was just fine, but with a full pre-approval, the lender has, in theory, verified those assets, that they're really there. And certainly, having a conversation with the lender, you can verify that. But that's a great point, Connie, just making sure. I mean, the agent certainly, if the agent knew, they certainly shouldn't have written the offer, like that. And that's going to be too bad if we're going to be put in the position now that we have to verify, down payments. But again, that's I think a big difference between the pre-qual and the pre-approval is those assets have been verified, including the ability to pay that appraisal gap. They might say, oh, we're willing to cover, a $50,000 appraisal gap. Well, okay, we're going to need some proof of funds here because, you said you're putting 20% down and the property's 400. So that's 80,000. And you're willing to cover a, $20,000 appraisal gap. So do you really have 100,000, available in the bank, or, is it something you have to cash out of your 401? And if the stock market crashes next week, are you really going to want to pull that out?
Yeah,
So,
that's a great point, Connie. And that a lot of people are tapping into equity in their current homes to buy another place and not making it contingent, which is totally fine to do, right? But if that line is not already established and you couldn't go pull against it tomorrow, then that's still contingent upon financing. That's
Yep.
not a cash offer. Some people are using that, $300,000 and trying to make a cash offer, but they haven't even tried to go apply for that line of credit yet. And well, yeah, that's great in theory, but that's a financed offer because just like you said, that can get declined. They could not end up getting the equity that they think they have there. So yeah, that's a slippery slope. So again, you're having buyers make offers with equity lines. Definitely ask a few more questions about it and make sure that it is established and open. If not, just explain to them that until it's established and open that you are still making a financed offer.
I actually just had this conversation with a potential listing client just the other day and suggested that she go talk to the lender about either a home equity line of credit or funds so that she can purchase before selling. Has anyone come across a home equity line of credit that you can close like within 2 or 3 months of buying and then selling your other one without a penalty?
Yeah, so Morgan Camplin at Homebridge actually just came out with a new product. We should have her come and talk to us about it because it is pretty unique. She was on the meeting talking about it that you were busy the last time, but yeah, so she basically it's this like gap filler type program. So so it's like a soft credit pull, and it will kind of just tell you what equity you might qualify for, and then you can decide if you want to go forward with it. But it's a great like interim, like gap filler type program. So definitely, Bill, that might be another lunch and learn we want to offer here, but this is another way to get creative to free up some equity to make it so you're not making contingent offers. And you can kind of move and then sell your house once you're moved out.
Perfect.
Yeah, but
I
Kim,
told her
that's a
to
good
go
question
talk
because
to
a lot
TJ,
of
so
those,
that's perfect.
what's that?
I was just saying, I told her to go talk to TJ, who works with Morgan, so perfect.
Yep,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, a lot of those equity line, for the rest of you, a lot of those equity lines do have, prepayment, penalties or if they're, I don't know if it's called a prepayment penalty, but if they close it out, within a certain amount of time, but usually the penalty, it's not very high. It's like, might be I've heard of $300 fees or $500 fees. So sometimes it's just the cost of doing business. Okay, to tap into this much equity, it's going to cost me, $500, when I pay it off. Of course, they won't do it. Generally, I don't think they'll do it if the house is on the market. Most banks aren't going to want to do it. So again, something to counsel your buyer / seller, to set this up ahead of time before you put the house on the market. Because if the lender sees, if Gorham Savings Bank or whoever it is sees the house on the market, they know that they're never going to make any money, on that loan because the client's going to close it out early. So sometimes we've actually had to pull stuff off the market so the seller could get an equity line. But the big thing, and we already covered it. Maybe it's the last thing we cover, but this is all of these things. This is a serious 1 hour counseling session, at least, with your buyer, covering all of these, options. Maybe you have a little checklist that, that you go down, or maybe you build a standard addendum that has all of these, maybe it's got 15 options or clauses or contingencies in it that your buyer can choose from, like, oh, we like this one, or we're comfortable with this one. Okay, we're not comfortable with a rent back, or we're not comfortable with this, but, give them all the options. You never want them to, feel like, we just had a situation where, an agent called me and, their buyer had lost out on the 9th, offer or whatever. And, the agent had, presented all of, or most of the possible scenarios. There was a few they didn't, but it was just a matter of, making sure the buyer doesn't feel that it's your fault that they're losing. I mean, you never want them to lose confidence in you. So the more options that you present them, and, if they're losing, it's either their choice because they're not comfortable with what they need to do to win, or it's things that they just can't overcome. They're not qualified high enough. They can't possibly do a conventional loan, whatever it might be. And, which is still hard, but you just don't want them to ever feel like, to lose confidence in their agent, that there's more that, we could have done. Give them all the options. And, like Carrie said, it's kind of a learning process, unfortunately, which means we're going to be wasting some time. But, after they lose out on 3 or 4, maybe they'll start, listening to you and, be willing to offer more than $1,000 earnest money, or be willing to put a cap on their investigations, or maybe get rid of it, entirely, or whatever it might be. So if nobody has anything else, we will conclude this class. I'll send out Carrie's and I's notes, for the class. So everyone has those, and hope you all, have a good day and better luck on the next bidding war situation that you have.
Awesome.
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right,
Thanks,
guys,
guys.
Have a good day.
have a good day.
Thank you.